They whispered that she was a nobody, a penniless orphan lucky enough to marry the rising corporate star Julian Thorne. For 3 years, Linda swallowed every insult, every late night, and every lipstick stain on his collar. But the world didn't know that her silence wasn't weakness. It was a contract. Julian thought he was parading his mistress in front of a helpless wife. He didn't realize he was waking a sleeping dragon. He didn't know that the woman washing his dishes had a guardian who could buy his entire company with pocket change. And when that guardian finally landed, the parade was over. The chandelier light inside Le Bernardin, one of New York City's most exclusive seafood restaurants, was soft, forgiving, and golden. It was the kind of light designed to make diamonds sparkle and secrets disappear. But tonight it did nothing to hide the humiliation etched onto Linda Thorne's face. It was their 3rd wedding anniversary. Across the table, her husband Julian Thorne swirled a glass of 1982 Chateau Margaux. He wasn't looking at Linda. He was looking at the woman sitting directly next to him on their anniversary. "You have to try the truffle pasta, Chloe," Julian said, his voice dripping with an affection he hadn't shown Linda in 2 years. He speared a piece of food and held it to the woman's lips. "It's divine, almost as exquisite as that dress." Chloe Sinclair giggled, the sound sharp and brittle like breaking glass. She was beautiful in a predatory way, clad in a red Versace evening gown that cost more than the car Linda drove. She leaned forward, brushing her shoulder against Julian's. "Oh, Julian, behave. Your wife is watching." Chloe didn't whisper. She looked directly at Linda, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Linda sat with her hands folded in her lap, her knuckles white. She wore a simple navy blue dress she had bought off the rack at Macy's 3 years ago. Beside Chloe's designer armor, Linda looked like the help. "Linda doesn't mind," Julian said dismissively, finally glancing at his wife. His eyes were cold, devoid of warmth. "She knows her place. She knows she's lucky to even be sitting at a table like this. Isn't that right, Elle?" Linda took a slow breath. The air smelled of expensive perfume and betrayal. "It is our anniversary, Julian," she said softly. I thought it would just be us." Julian slammed his wine glass down. The sound silenced the nearby tables for a split second. "Stop being so ungrateful," he hissed. "Chloe is my vice president of marketing. We have business to discuss. You should be thanking me. Most men in my position would have left a boring, penniless orphan like you years ago. I provide you with a house in Greenwich, a car, and food. The least you can do is not embarrass me with your jealousy." "I'm not jealous," Linda said, her voice steady though her heart hammered. "I just wanted one night. And I want a wife who brings something to the table besides a depressed attitude," Julian shot back. He turned back to Chloe, his demeanor instantly softening. "Ignore her, darling. Order the lobster." Linda looked down at her empty plate. The waiter, a young man who looked pained by the scene, poured her water with a sympathetic grimace. For 3 years, this had been her life. When she met Julian, he had been a charming, ambitious junior executive. Linda had been quiet, seemingly alone in the world, working as a freelance librarian. He had wooed her, or so she thought. In reality, he had needed a safe wife, someone with no family to interfere, no connections to leverage, and no ego to challenge him while he climbed the corporate ladder at Sterling & Co., the massive conglomerate he worked for. But as Julian's success grew, so did his cruelty. He flaunted his affairs. He cut off her access to their joint accounts, giving her a humiliating allowance of $200 a week for groceries. "Oh, look," Chloe said loudly, pointing to Linda's wrist. "Is that a plastic watch?" Julian laughed. "She refuses to wear the Apple Watch I bought her. Claims she likes the sentiment of that old trash." Linda covered the watch with her other hand. It was an old battered leather strap with a faded face. It wasn't plastic. It was a rare vintage Patek Philippe Ref 1518 passed down through a lineage Julian knew nothing about. To him it looked like junk. To collectors, it was worth millions. "It was a gift," Linda murmured, "from a friend." You don't have friends, Linda, Julian sneered. You only have me. He signaled for the check. Come on, Chloe. Let's go to the Pierre Hotel for drinks. The atmosphere here is too depressing. What about me? Linda asked, looking up. Julian stood adjusting his Brioni suit jacket. Take an Uber home. I won't be back tonight. I have a late strategy meeting. Chloe smirked, sliding her arm through Julian's. Don't wait up, sweetie. They walked out, leaving Linda alone at the table for three. The bill lay unpaid on the table. Julian had forgotten it in his haste to leave with his mistress. The waiter approached cautiously. Ma'am, the gentleman left the bill. Linda looked at the check. It was for $200. She opened her purse. She didn't have Julian's credit card. He had taken it for safekeeping last week. She had $20 in cash, but she also had a black titanium card tucked in a hidden lining of her wallet. A card with no numbers, just a gold crest of a lion holding a key. She hesitated. Not yet, she told herself. Not yet. She pulled out her phone. I'll pay via Apple Pay, she said to the waiter, linking it to a dormant account she had sworn never to touch. As the transaction cleared, a notification pinged on a server thousands of miles away in Zurich. She walked out into the cold New York rain. Julian's Porsche was long gone. Linda didn't call an Uber. She walked 3 blocks to a quiet park bench, sat down, and looked at the Patek Philippe on her wrist. 3 years, she whispered to the rain. I promised I'd try to live a normal life for 3 years. I promised I'd see if a man could love me, not the name. She twisted the watch face. Time's up. 2 days later, the situation shifted from neglect to invasion. Linda was in the kitchen of their Greenwich, Connecticut home, a sprawling modern estate that felt more like a museum than a home. She was kneading dough. Cooking was her therapy. The front door slammed open. Linda, get your things out of the master suite. Julian's voice boomed through the hallway. Linda wiped the flour from her hands and walked into the foyer. She froze. Julian wasn't alone. Chloe was there carrying a Louis Vuitton speedy bag, looking around the foyer with a critical eye. Behind them were 2 movers carrying boxes. What is going on? Linda asked. Chloe is moving in for a few weeks, Julian said casually, as if he were discussing the weather. Her apartment in Manhattan is being renovated. The fumes are bad for her migraines. She needs fresh air. She's moving in. Linda felt the room spin. Julian, this is our home. You cannot bring your mistress to live here. Chloe stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the marble. Mistress is such an ugly word, Ellie. Think of me as a house guest. Besides, Julian says you barely use the master bath anyway. You prefer the shower in the guest hall, don't you? I use the guest shower because the master drain has been broken for 6 months, and Julian refused to call a plumber. Linda said, her voice trembling with rage. Well, I'm having it fixed today, Julian said. Chloe needs comfort, and since she needs the master suite, you'll be moving into the servants' quarters downstairs. Linda stared at him. The servants' quarters were a small windowless room next to the laundry area. It was damp and cold. You want me to sleep in the basement? Linda stated flatly. It's temporary. Julian waved his hand. Don't be dramatic. Unless you want a divorce, because if we divorce, you get nothing. You sign that prenup. You leave with the clothes on your back. No alimony, no assets. You'll be back on the street. He wielded the prenup like a weapon. He didn't know the prenup was invalid. The lawyer who drafted it for him worked for a firm secretly owned by the Vance estate. Linda had let him sign it to see if he would ever treat her fairly without financial incentive. He had failed the test. I won't move to the basement, Linda said. Julian stepped into her personal space, towering over her. Then get out. I'm tired of looking at your miserable face. Chloe is the future of my company. She brings in clients. She shines at galas. You're an anchor dragging me down. Chloe laughed, picking up a framed photo of Linda and Julian from the hallway table, the only one in the house. She dropped it. The glass shattered. Oops, Chloe smirked. Butterfingers. Julian didn't even flinch. He kicked a piece of glass toward Linda. "Clean that up, then make dinner. Chloe likes her steak medium rare, and don't burn it like last time." They walked up the grand staircase together, Chloe loudly discussing how she was going to redecorate the bedroom. Linda stood amidst the shattered glass. She looked at the photo. In it, she looked hopeful. That hope was dead now. She didn't clean up the glass. Instead, she turned and walked into the library. She closed the door and locked it. She went to the bookshelf and pulled out a copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. Inside the hollowed-out book was a burner phone, an old secure satellite device. She powered it on. It had one contact saved. She pressed the call button. It rang once. "Status?" A deep, gravelly voice answered immediately. "It's Linda," she said. Her voice didn't shake anymore. It was cold, hard, and commanding. The voice of a woman who was done pretending to be weak. There was a pause on the other end. A sharp intake of breath. "Miss Vance, we haven't heard from you since the wedding. Is everything all right?" "No, Arthur. The experiment is over." Did he hurt you?" The voice on the line dropped an octave, becoming dangerous. "He broke the contract, Arthur. He broke me. I'm done playing the orphan." "I see. What are your orders, ma'am?" Linda looked out the window at Julian's Porsche parked in the driveway, a car she had paid for through a shell company. "I want activation. Protocol 0. "Protocol 0, Arthur repeated. "That is the scorched earth option, Miss Vance. That involves the Guardian. That involves Sir Alistair." "Is he still in London?" "He is in Monaco closing a deal with the royal family. But for you, he will be in Connecticut by dinner." "Good," Linda said. "Julian is hosting the Sterling & Co. shareholders gala tomorrow night at the St. Regis. He plans to announce his promotion to CEO. He plans to introduce Chloe as his partner." "I see. I want the Guardian there. And Arthur." "Yes, Miss Vance. Bring the file on Julian's accounts. Every penny he embezzled, every tax loop he skipped. And bring the ownership papers for the house." "With pleasure. And Miss Vance." "Yes. Welcome back." Linda hung up. She didn't go to the basement. She went to the guest room, packed a single bag, and sat on the edge of the bed. She checked her reflection in the mirror. The meek housewife was gone. Her eyes, usually cast down, were burning with icy fire. Upstairs, she could hear Julian and Chloe laughing. The morning of the Sterling & Co. annual gala was chaotic. The Greenwich house was filled with stylists, makeup artists, and tailors, all for Chloe. Linda sat at the kitchen island drinking black coffee from a chipped mug. She watched as a team of 3 assistants fussed over Chloe's hair. Julian was pacing the living room on the phone with the board of directors. "Yes, the numbers are up 15% this quarter," Julian barked into his phone. "I expect the announcement to be made tonight. The CEO position is mine. It's a formality at this point." He hung up and turned to Chloe. "You look stunning, babe. The press is going to eat you up. The new power couple of Wall Street." He finally glanced at Linda. She was wearing jeans and an oversized sweater. "I assume you're staying here tonight?" Julian asked, checking his watch. "I didn't buy you a ticket. It's $5,000 a plate. And honestly, Elle, you just sit there looking like a funeral attendee. It's bad for morale." "I wouldn't want to ruin your big night, Julian," Linda said calmly. She took a sip of coffee. Her hand was steady. "Exactly." Julian nodded, relieved she wasn't putting up a fight. "Besides, you have work to do. The cleaning lady quit this morning, probably because you followed her around too much. The house is a mess. I want the ground floor spotless by the time we get back tomorrow. We're hosting an after-party brunch." Chloe swanned into the kitchen wearing a shimmering gold gown that was cut dangerously low. She looked like a trophy, expensive, shiny, and hollow. "Don't work her too hard, Julian." Chloe laughed. "She looks tired. Maybe she should just go away." "Soon enough," Julian muttered. At 5:00 p.m., a black stretch limousine pulled up to the driveway. Julian and Chloe walked out, not even saying goodbye. Linda watched from the window as Julian held the door for his mistress, his hand lingering on her waist. As the limo disappeared down the long, winding driveway, the house fell silent. Linda placed her mug in the sink. She didn't wash it. She walked to the front door and opened it. Waiting at the gate obscured by the hedges was not a limousine. It was a convoy. 3 matte black Mercedes-Maybach G650 Landaulettes sat idling, their engines purring with a low, menacing rumble. Beside them stood 4 men in dark suits with earpieces. The lead car's door opened. A man stepped out. He was in his 60s with steel gray hair and a posture that suggested military discipline wrapped in bespoke Italian wool. This was Arthur, the voice on the phone, the executor of the Vance estate. He walked up the driveway, his shoes crunching on the gravel. He stopped in front of Linda and bowed a deep, respectful bow that no one had given her in 3 years. "The package is ready, Miss Vance," Arthur said, "and Sir Alistair has landed at Teterboro Airport. He is en route to the hotel." "Does Julian know who holds the majority shares of Sterling & Co. yet?" Linda asked. "No, ma'am. He believes the majority shareholder is a holding company in the Caymans called V Group. He has no idea the V stands for Vance." "Good," Linda said. "I want to see his face when he finds out he's been working for his wife's family the entire time." Arthur signaled to the second car. A woman stepped out carrying a garment bag stamped with the logo of Givenchy Haute Couture, but not the store logo. The Atelier logo. This was custom. "Your dress, Miss Vance. Archival. It belonged to your mother." Linda touched the fabric through the plastic. "And the jewelry." Arthur reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a velvet box. He opened it. Inside lay the Romanov sapphires, a necklace and earring set that had been missing from public auction records for 20 years. The deep blue stones seemed to absorb the light. "Sir Alistair insisted," Arthur said. "He said if you are going to war, you should wear armor." Linda took the box. Her eyes hardened. "Let's go, Arthur. I have a husband to fire." The grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive champagne and ambition. This was the night of the year for New York's financial elite. Julian Thorne was in his element. He stood near the center of the room, a glass of champagne in hand, holding court with 3 junior executives who hung on his every word. Chloe was glued to his side, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. "The key to the Asian market," Julian pontificated, "is aggression. You go in, you take what you want, and you apologize later. That's how I run my department, and that's how I'll run this company as CEO." "Brilliant, Julian," one of the executives said. "The board is lucky to have you." "They know it," Julian smirked. "The current CEO, Old Man Henderson, is retiring tonight. I've already seen the press release draft. It's a done deal." Suddenly the hum of conversation in the ballroom changed. It didn't stop, it shifted. Heads started turning toward the massive double doors at the entrance. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd like a wave. "Who is that? Is that a movie star?" "No, look at the security." Julian frowned, annoyed that the attention had shifted away from him. He turned around. The doors swung open. Walking in wasn't a celebrity. It was a woman in a midnight blue velvet gown that hugged her silhouette before cascading into a dramatic train. The dress was off the shoulder, revealing a neck adorned with sapphires so large they looked fake, except the way they caught the light proved they were terrifyingly real. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was styled in glamorous Hollywood waves. Her face was struck with a confidence that made her look 10 years younger and infinitely more dangerous. Julian squinted. The woman looked familiar. The walk. He knew that walk, but the aura. He didn't know that aura. The woman turned and the light hit her face. Julian dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor, splashing Prosecco onto Chloe's gold dress. "What the hell?" Chloe shrieked, jumping back. "Julian, you ruined my shoes!" Julian didn't hear her. He was staring, his mouth slightly open. "Linda," he whispered. It was impossible. The drudge he had left at home in jeans, the woman who cleaned his floors. Here wearing that Linda didn't look at him. She walked straight to the bar, the crowd parting for her instinctively. She ordered a sparkling water with a twist of lime. Julian's shock turned to fury. He grabbed Chloe's arm and marched across the room. "What do you think you're doing?" Julian hissed, grabbing Linda's elbow. Linda slowly looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his eyes. "Remove your hand, Julian, or I will have security remove it for you." "Security?" Julian laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "I am the security here. I'm the future CEO. You're crashing my event. Look at you. You stole a dress. Did you max out the emergency credit card? I'm going to have you arrested." "Who is she, Julian?" an older board member asked, stepping closer, eyeing the sapphires with confusion. She's my soon-to-be ex-wife," Julian stammered. "She's mentally unstable. She followed me here." "I am not leaving, Julian," Linda said, her voice projecting clearly over the immediate crowd. "I'm here to watch the announcement." "Get out!" Julian shouted, losing his composure. "Security! Get this woman out of here!" Two burly security guards started to move toward Linda. The sound wasn't an explosion. It was the sound of the ballroom's main doors being thrown open with such force that they banged against the walls. The room went dead silent. Standing in the doorway was a phalanx of 6 men. They weren't hotel security. They were private military contractors wearing earpieces and suits that cost more than most cars. They marched into the room, forming a corridor. Then he walked in. He was a giant of a man, standing 6'4". He wore a tuxedo that was cut perfectly to his broad shoulders. He leaned on a cane topped with a silver wolf's head, but he didn't use it for support. He used it as a scepter. His face was weathered, handsome, and terrifying. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow. It was Sir Alistair Vance. The room gasped. "That's Alistair Vance." The board member next to Julian whispered, his face draining of color. "The Wolf of London. He hasn't been seen in the U.S. in 10 years. He owns half of Europe." Julian felt a cold sweat break out on his back. He knew the name. Everyone in finance knew the name. Alistair Vance was a predator who ate companies for breakfast. Alistair walked into the room. The silence was absolute. He didn't look at the board members. He didn't look at the CEO. He walked straight toward the commotion near the bar. Julian stepped forward, extending his hand, blocking Alistair's path to Linda. "Sir Alistair," Julian said, putting on his best winning smile. "What an honor. I'm Julian Thorne, the incoming CEO of Sterling & Co. I'm a huge admirer of your—" Alistair didn't even slow down. He didn't shake the hand. He simply walked through Julian, his shoulder checking Julian so hard that the younger man stumbled back, nearly tripping over Chloe. Alistair stopped in front of Linda. The entire room watched, breathless. Was he going to yell at her? Was he going to demand why she was wearing those jewels? Alistair Vance, the man known for making grown men cry in boardrooms, slowly dropped to one knee. He took Linda's hand and kissed her knuckles. "I apologize for the delay, my dear," Alistair said, his voice deep and rumbling like thunder. "The traffic on the bridge was dreadful. I hope no one has been bothering you." He stood up, towering over everyone, and turned his cold gray eyes onto Julian. "Linda," Alistair said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. "Is this the husband you told me about, the one who parades his harlot around while spending your inheritance?" Julian's knees buckled. "Inheritance?" Julian squeaked. Linda smiled. It was a shark smile. "Julian," she said softly, "I'd like you to meet my guardian, Sir Alistair Vance. And I think you should know, he's the one who actually owns the company you work for." The silence in the St. Regis ballroom was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. Julian Thorne stared at Sir Alister Vance, his brain struggling to process the information. He looked at Linda. She stood tall, the sapphires at her throat glittering like cold blue eyes. She didn't look like the woman who clipped coupons for groceries. She looked like royalty. "You're joking." Julian stammered, his laugh sounding frantic. "This is a joke, right? Linda doesn't have a guardian. She's an orphan. She has nobody." Alister Vance didn't even blink. He slowly unbuttoned his tuxedo jacket and handed his cane to one of the bodyguards. "She was an orphan," Alister corrected, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling, "until my late brother, Lord Sebastian Vance, located her 3 years ago. She is his only biological child, and the sole heiress to the Vance global conglomerate." A collective gasp ripped through the room. Vance Global. It was an empire that touched everything from shipping to pharmaceuticals. It was 50 times the size of Sterling & Co. "But," Julian pointed a shaking finger at Linda, "she lived in my house. She wore rags. She drove a 10-year-old Honda." "Because she wanted to know if you loved her," Alistair said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Or if you just loved the idea of controlling someone. We made a bet, Julian. Linda believed in the goodness of your heart. I believed you were a narcissistic parasite." Alistair smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I love being right." "This is ridiculous," Chloe shrieked, breaking the tension. She stepped forward, trying to regain the spotlight. "Who cares who her daddy was? Julian is the CEO of this company. He's the one who made the profits this quarter. You can't just walk in here and—" "Silence, child," Alistair said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The authority in his voice snapped like a whip. "Mr. Henderson," Alistair called out without looking away from Julian. The current CEO of Sterling & Co., a balding man named Robert Henderson, hurried out of the crowd. He looked terrified. "Yes, Sir Alistair." "Who owns the controlling stake in Sterling & Co. as of this morning?" "V Group, sir," Henderson said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Which is a subsidiary of Vance Global." "And who is the chairwoman of Vance Global?" Henderson turned to Linda and bowed low. "Mrs. Linda Thorne." Julian felt the blood leave his legs. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. He had been treating his boss, the owner of his entire world, like a servant. "Linda," Julian whispered, changing tactics instantly. He took a step forward, his eyes filling with fake tears. "Baby, why didn't you tell me? I would have celebrated you. We could have ruled the world together. Look, I know we've had our rough patch, but—" "Rough patch," Linda interrupted. Her voice was calm, amplified by the acoustics of the silent room. She walked toward the stage. The microphone stand was waiting. She took it. "A rough patch implies a struggle shared by two people," Linda said into the mic, addressing the hundreds of guests. "What we had, Julian, was exploitation." She gestured to the large screen behind the stage, usually reserved for stock graphs. "Arthur, play the reel." The screen flickered to life, but it wasn't a corporate video. It was a spreadsheet, then photos. "For the last 2 years," Linda narrated, "Julian has claimed our household budget was tight. He forced me to live on $200 a week. Meanwhile—" The crowd murmured. Phones were out recording everything. "You expensed your mistress to the company account," Linda said, "under client entertainment and marketing logistics." Chloe's face went pale. "That's a lie. Those were legitimate business trips." "I checked the logs, Chloe," Linda said coolly. "Unless marketing involves 3 days at a couple's spa in the Swiss Alps, I believe this is called embezzlement." Julian roared, lunging toward the stage. "Turn it off! You can't do this! This is defamation!" 2 of Alistair's guards stepped in his path. They didn't push him. They simply stood there like brick walls. Julian bounced off them. "Julian Thorne," Linda said, looking down at him from the stage. "You wanted a big announcement tonight. You wanted everyone to know your status." She paused. "So here it is. You are fired." Julian froze. "Not just fired?" Linda continued. We are pressing charges for corporate theft and fraud. Security has already cleared out your office. Your company phone has been deactivated. And your company car, well, the valet has the keys. You can't do this to me. Julian screamed, his composure shattering completely. I built this department. I am Sterling & Co. You are a liability, Alistair Vance said, stepping up beside Linda. And you are trespassing. Alistair signaled to the guards. Get him out of my sight, and take the girl too. She's an accessory to fraud. No, no, Chloe screamed as a guard grabbed her arm. I didn't know. He told me he paid for it. Julian, tell them. Julian didn't answer. He was staring at Linda, his eyes wide with horror as two guards hoisted him by his armpits. They dragged him backward through the ballroom. His shoe fell off. As he was hauled past the elite of New York society people he had tried so hard to impress, they didn't look at him with pity. They looked at him with disgust. Linda stood center stage, the spotlight reflecting off the Romanov sapphires. She didn't look happy. She looked resolved. Enjoy the evening, everyone, she said softly. The open bar is on me. The transition from the golden champagne-scented air of the St. Regis Ballroom to the gritty freezing pavement of 55th Street was violent and absolute. The side exit doors didn't just open. They were flung wide by the private military contractors. Julian Thorne was shoved hard. He stumbled, his expensive Italian leather shoes losing traction on the wet concrete, and he went down on his hands and knees. The impact jarred his teeth, and the icy sludge of a New York gutter soaked instantly into the knees of his bespoke tuxedo trousers. Beside him, Chloe Sinclair didn't fare much better. She was practically tossed out, her balance compromised by the towering Louboutin heels she had insisted on wearing. She landed awkwardly, her ankle twisting with the sickening snap of plastic and leather. The heel of her right shoe broke off, skittering into a drain. My shoe! Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing off the brick alleyway. She scrambled up, balancing on one foot, her hair, which had cost $600 to style 3 hours ago, now plastering itself to her forehead in the sudden downpour. You animals! Do you know how much these cost, Julian? Do something! The heavy steel doors slammed shut behind them with a finality that sounded like a prison cell locking. The muffled sound of the orchestra and the murmur of the gala vanished, replaced by the relentless hiss of the rain and the distant, uncaring honking of taxis on Fifth Avenue. Julian slowly pushed himself up. His palms were scraped and bleeding. He wiped them on his jacket, leaving streaks of black grime on the silk lapels. He stared at the closed door, his mind reeling, unable to process the sheer velocity of his fall. 10 minutes ago, he was holding a glass of vintage Dom Perignon, seconds away from being crowned the king of Sterling & Co. Now he was standing in trash water. This is a mistake, Julian muttered, his eyes wide and unblinking. He spun around, looking at Chloe with a frantic, manic energy. It's a prank. It has to be. Linda doesn't have the spine for this. She's Linda. She cries when she kills a spider. Wake up, you idiot, Chloe screamed, shoving him. She was shivering, her strapless gold dress offering zero protection against the October chill. Mascara was beginning to run down her cheeks in dark Gothic streaks. Did you see that necklace? Did you see the security? That wasn't a prank, Julian. That was an execution. You told me she was a nobody. You told me she was a penniless orphan lucky to breathe the same air as you. She is, Julian roared back, his voice cracking. She's a fraud. That old man Vance, he's probably an actor. She hired him. She's trying to embarrass me because she found out about us. It's a desperate ploy to get me back. A desperate ploy? Chloe laughed, a high, hysterical sound that grated on Julian's nerves. Julian, the CEO of the company, bowed to her. The board of directors looked like they were going to wet themselves. That wasn't acting. That was power. Real money. The kind of money that buys and sells people like us for sport. She leaned in, poking a manicured finger into his chest. You said you were the golden boy. You said you had the company in the palm of your hand. You lied. I didn't lie. Julian defended himself, though his confidence was crumbling like wet sand. I am the reason profits are up. They need me. I'll call my lawyer. I'll call HR. You can't just fire a C-suite executive in front of 500 witnesses without cause. I'll sue them for wrongful termination. I'll sue Linda for defamation. I'll take everything. He began patting his pockets frantically. Where's my phone? I need my phone. You left it on the table when you tried to attack her. Chloe spat, hugging her arms around herself. Brilliant move, by the way, attacking the woman who owns the building. Shut up, Chloe, I need to think. Julian raked his hands through his wet hair. Okay. We go to the apartment, we regroup. I have files on my laptop at home, leverage on the board members. If they want a war, I'll give them a war. He turned toward the street, looking for his Porsche. The valet stand was around the corner, but the spot where his gleaming 911 Turbo usually sat was empty. Where is my car? Julian shouted at the empty street. The valet has my keys. Mr. Thorne! The voice came from the shadows of the service entrance overhang. It was calm, precise, and terrified Julian more than the shouting guards had. Arthur stepped into the pale yellow light of a flickering street lamp. He was holding a large black umbrella, perfectly dry, his suit immaculate. In his hand he held a thick, sealed manila envelope. Julian straightened his spine, trying to summon the arrogance that had carried him through life so far. You, the butler. Where is my car if you've stolen it? I'll add grand theft auto to the lawsuit. Arthur didn't blink. He walked forward until he was just out of arm's reach, the rain bouncing off his umbrella. The Porsche was leased under the company name Julian. Arthur said, his voice smooth and devoid of pity. As you were terminated for cause, specifically gross misconduct and embezzlement, the asset has been repossessed effective immediately. I believe the valet handed the keys to the repo team about 5 minutes ago. Repossessed, Julian sputtered. I paid the lease payments with my money. With company money, Arthur corrected gently. We have the expense reports. Consulting fees paid to a shell corporation that pays the car dealership amateur work, really. The forensic accountants found it in less than an hour. Chloe groaned, leaning against the wet brick wall. Oh my God, you expensed the car too. Focus, Julian, Arthur said, extending the envelope. Mrs. Vance, sorry force of habit, Mrs. Thorne thought you should have these. It might save you the embarrassment of calling lawyers who won't answer your calls. Julian snatched the wet envelope. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely tear the tab. He ripped it open and a stack of legal documents slid out. He held them up to the street lamp. The house, Julian said, squinting at the deed to the Greenwich mansion. This is wrong. It says the owner is the Argus Trust. I'm on the deed. I signed the closing papers 3 years ago. You signed the signature page, Arthur corrected. You didn't read the trust agreement attached to the rider. You were too busy bragging to the real estate agent about your bonus to notice that you were signing as a tenant in common with no equity. The down payment, the $200,000 you thought you saved, was actually a transfer Linda made from her trust fund into your account, disguised as that lottery win. Remember the scratch-off ticket she gave you for your birthday? Julian felt the blood drain from his face. He remembered. He had won $200,000 on a ticket Linda had bought him. He had called himself the luckiest man alive. She rigged a lottery ticket, Julian whispered. She owns the printing company that produces them for the state, Arthur said simply. It wasn't a real ticket. It was a test. She wanted to see if you would use the money for us to pay off the house or if you would spend it on yourself. You put it toward the house, which gave her hope. But you put the house in your name, or so you thought. So, I don't own the house. You don't own a brick of it. You are a squatter. And as of tonight, the locks have been changed. Julian flipped to the next page. It was a document titled Post-Nuptial Amendment. And this is the killing blow, Arthur said, gesturing to the paper. The prenup, Julian said quickly. The prenup protects me. It says what's mine is mine. She can't touch my personal savings. The prenup was weak, Arthur agreed. But do you recall 6 months ago you had a liquidity issue, a gambling debt, $50,000 owed to a bookie in Atlantic City. Julian flinched. He hadn't told anyone about that. Linda found some money from a distant aunt's inheritance to bail you out. Arthur continued narrating the memory. She gave you the cash, and in exchange she asked you to sign a simple document. A formality, you called it. You didn't even read it. You just wanted the cash to stop the bookie from breaking your legs. Julian looked at the document in his hands. He saw his own signature at the bottom. Clause 4, Section B. Arthur recited from memory. In the event of proven infidelity by the husband, all marital assets, including personal savings, retirement accounts, and future stock options, shall be forfeited to the wife as damages for emotional distress. Arthur pulled a second packet from his jacket pocket. Photos. High-resolution time-stamped photos. Julian and Chloe in Cabo. Julian and Chloe in the Aspen Chalet. Julian kissing Chloe in the back of the very limo he had taken to the gala. We have the proof, Julian. The contract is triggered. Your personal savings account emptied an hour ago. Your 401k transferred. You are currently at a net worth of $0. Julian dropped the papers. They scattered into the puddle, the ink running like black tears. He fell back against the wall, sliding down until he hit the ground. He looked at his hands. $0? Actually, Arthur mused, checking his watch. Less than $0. The IRS has been notified about the unreported income from your embezzlement. You owe the federal government roughly $300,000 in back taxes and penalties. They will likely garnish your wages for the rest of your life. Chloe let out a strangled sob. She looked at Julian not with love or even pity, but with pure, unadulterated loathing. "You broke loser," she hissed. She began to limp away toward the avenue. "Chloe!" Julian called out, his voice sounding small and childlike. "Chloe, wait. We can figure this out. We can stay at your place in Soho, just for a few days." Chloe stopped. She turned around, the rain plastering her dress to her body. "My place, Julian, you idiot. The lease for the Soho apartment is in your name. The company paid for it. If you're fired and the company accounts are frozen, the eviction notice is probably already on the door." "But where will we go?" Chloe laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "There is no we. I was with you because you were going to be a CEO. I was with you for the trips, the jewelry, the access. But you're just a pathetic little man who got outplayed by his mouse wife." She stepped off the curb and raised her hand. A yellow taxi screeched to a halt, splashing dirty water onto Julian's legs. "Don't call me," Chloe said as she opened the cab door. "And if you do, I'll tell the police you forced me to embezzle that money. I'll turn witness against you so fast your head will spin." "Chloe, I love you," Julian screamed, scrambling to his feet. "I love your credit limit," she replied coldly. "And it just hit its limit." She slammed the door. The taxi sped off, its taillights blurring into the red haze of the city night. Julian stood alone in the rain. He was shivering violently now. He had no coat, no car, no home, no money, and no lover. Arthur cleared his throat. Julian turned slowly to look at the older man. Arthur was the only thing left. Is she watching?" Julian whispered, looking up at the towering facade of the St. Regis. "She is," Arthur said. "She is watching from the penthouse suite." "Tell her I'm sorry." Julian choked out, tears finally mixing with the rain. "Tell her I'll do anything. I'll sign whatever she wants. Just don't leave me on the street. I have nowhere to go." Mrs. Thorne anticipated this, Arthur said. He reached into his inner pocket one last time. He pulled out a single damp piece of paper. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a boarding pass. "She offers you a choice, Julian. Mercy of a sort." Julian took the ticket. His hands were numb. He squinted at the destination. "Alaska." Julian looked up, bewildered. "Vance Global owns a subsidiary there," Arthur explained. "North Star Mining Supply. It is a remote facility, very isolated. They are in need of a warehouse logistics coordinator. It involves heavy lifting, long hours, and sub-zero temperatures, but it comes with a dormitory room and 3 hot meals a day. She wants me to be a laborer. Julian gasped. I'm a Harvard graduate. I'm a finance executive. You are an embezzler who is currently facing 20 years in federal prison. Arthur corrected sharply. His eyes hardened, losing the veneer of politeness. Here is the deal. There is a car waiting around the corner to take you to JFK. This plane leaves in 3 hours. If you get on it, Linda will instruct the legal team to pause the FBI investigation. She will absorb the debt you owe the company. You will live in obscurity, working off your sins in the cold. Arthur took a step closer, his shadow falling over Julian. But if you are still in New York City when the sun rises, if you try to fight this or contact her or sell your story to the press, Sir Alistair will release the hounds. The FBI will be at your door by breakfast. You will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. You will die in a cell. Arthur dropped the umbrella. It rolled to Julian's feet. Take the umbrella, Julian. You'll need it where you're going. Arthur turned on his heel and walked back toward the hotel entrance, moving with the grace of a man who had taken out the trash. Julian stood frozen. He looked at the warmth of the hotel lobby glowing like heaven just 50 feet away. Then he looked at the dark, wet street. He looked at the ticket. One way. He realized with a crushing weight that Linda hadn't just defeated him. She had erased him. In New York, he was a criminal. In Alaska, he was a nobody. But a nobody was better than a prisoner. Julian Thorne. The man who would be king bent down and picked up the umbrella. His knees cracked. He looked at the ticket one last time, let out a sob that was swallowed by the thunder, and began to walk toward the corner where the black sedan was waiting to take him to hell. 6 months had passed since the night of the St. Regis Gala. The scandal had been the talk of New York City for weeks, dubbed by the tabloids as the Red Wedding of Wall Street. But like all scandals, the noise eventually faded, leaving only the truth behind. And the truth was that Linda Thorne, now Linda Vance, was no longer hiding. The morning sun streamed into the corner office on the 45th floor of the Sterling & Co. building. The space, once a shrine to Julian's ego with dark mahogany and leather, had been transformed. It was now bright, airy, and filled with cream-colored furniture and fresh orchids. Linda sat behind the glass desk, reviewing the quarterly reports. She wore a tailored white suit that cost more than Julian's entire wardrobe. Her hair was loose, cascading over her shoulders. The timid, hunched posture of the housewife was gone, replaced by the relaxed grace of a woman who owned the building. There was a knock on the door. "Enter," Linda said, not looking up from her iPad. Arthur walked in, looking pleased. "The final divorce decree, ma'am. Judge Holloway signed it this morning. You are officially a free woman." Linda put down the stylus. She took the document. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt heavy with history. "And Julian?" she asked. "He is adjusting," Arthur said with a dry smile. "Our contact in Alaska reports that Mr. Thorne has been named Employee of the Month at the mining supply depot. Apparently, he is very efficient at stacking crates in sub-zero temperatures. He has lost 20 pounds and his hairline is receding rapidly. And Chloe, she attempted to sue you for emotional distress." Arthur chuckled. "But when her lawyers found out she was blacklisted by every major agency in the city, they dropped her. I believe she is currently working as a hostess at a dive bar in New Jersey. Karma, as they say, has been thorough." Linda nodded, feeling a strange lack of satisfaction. She didn't feel happy about their misery. She just felt finished. They were ghosts to her now. "Thank you, Arthur. Burn the decree. I don't need to keep it." "Very good, ma'am. Oh, and Sir Alistair is here." Alistair Vance walked in looking as formidable as ever, though his eyes held a warmth reserved only for his niece. He was leaning on his cane, watching her with pride. "You look like your father," Alistair said gruffly. "He would have been terrified of you." Linda smiled, standing up to kiss his cheek. "I'm learning from the best uncle. By the way, the board approved the charity initiative. We're turning the Greenwich estate into a shelter for women escaping domestic financial abuse. I didn't want to sell it. I wanted to repurpose it. Alistair raised an eyebrow. Turning a monument of your misery into a sanctuary for others poetic. It's necessary, Linda corrected. No woman should ever have to stay in a loveless marriage because she can't afford a sandwich. Agreed, Alistair said. Now enough business. You have a lunch appointment. I do. Linda checked her calendar. I don't see anything. I added it, Alistair said, checking his pocket watch. Harrison Blackwood, the CEO of Blackwood Tech. He's looking for a partner for the European expansion. And he explicitly asked to meet the woman who brought Julian Thorne to his knees. Linda rolled her eyes playfully. Is he another shark uncle? He is a wolf, Linda, like us. But he is a wolf who knows how to treat a queen. He's waiting at Le Bernardin. Linda froze. Le Bernardin, the restaurant where Julian had humiliated her on their anniversary, the place where her old life had effectively ended. Why there? Linda asked quietly. Because, Alistair said, placing a hand on her shoulder. You need to walk back into that room, not as the wife who was ignored, but as the woman who owns the table. Rewrite the memory, Linda. The maitre d', the same one who had looked at her with pity 6 months ago, almost tripped over his own feet when he saw her. Ms. Vance, he exclaimed, bowing low. Welcome back. We have the private alcove prepared. Linda walked through the dining room, heads turned. Whispers followed her, but this time they weren't mocking. They were reverent. She wasn't the poor wife anymore. She was the Titan. She reached the table, the same table where she had sat alone. Sitting there was a man. He stood up immediately as she approached. Harrison Blackwood was tall with dark hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't look around the room for someone more important. He looked only at her. Linda Vance, he said, extending a hand. It is an honor. I've heard you're the toughest negotiator in New York. Linda took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and respectful. I have my moments, Mr. Blackwood. She smiled. Please call me Harrison, and I took the liberty of ordering for us, he said, pulling out her chair for her. I hope you don't mind. Linda sat down. What did you order? The chef's tasting menu. No truffle pasta. Harrison winked. And I already paid the bill in advance, so we can just talk. Linda looked at him surprised. You paid? I was told you value independence, Harrison said softly. But everyone deserves to be treated to lunch now and then. Besides, I wanted to make sure you knew that I'm not sitting here because of your inheritance. I'm sitting here because I read your proposal on the Clean Water Initiative, and it was brilliant. Linda looked down at her wrist. She was still wearing the battered Patek Philippe. Harrison noticed it. Ref de 1518, beautiful piece, tells a story. It tells the story of survival, Linda said, touching the glass face. Well, Harrison raised his glass. Here's to the next chapter, to survival, and to thriving. Linda picked up her glass. The ghost of Julian was gone. The coldness of the past 3 years had melted away. She was sitting at the best table in New York across from a man who saw her not just her utility. She clinked her glass against his. To the next chapter, she whispered. Outside, the rain began to fall on the New York streets, washing away the grime of the city. But inside, Linda Vance was warm, safe, and for the first time in a long time, truly happy. The Queen had not just survived the game, she had won it. And that is the story of Linda Vance. Julian thought he held all the cards. He thought his wife was nothing more than a placeholder, a pawn to be used and discarded while he chased shiny, shallow dreams. He didn't realize that the woman washing his dishes was holding a royal flush the entire time. It's a powerful reminder that silence isn't weakness and humility isn't stupidity. Julian lost everything. His career, his reputation, and the only woman who ever actually loved him because he couldn't see the value of what he had until it was gone. He ended up freezing in Alaska while Linda rewrote her destiny. What did you think of Julian's punishment? Was exile to Alaska enough? Or should Linda have sent him to prison? And have you ever had a moment where someone underestimated you only for you to prove them wrong? Let me know your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice, betrayal, and romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching.